When didst thou see the elephants dance? Kala Nag put little Ch09 down, and he bowed to the earth again and went away with his father, and gave the silver 4 apiece to his mother, who was nursing his baby brother, and they all were put up on Kala Nag's back, and the line of grunting, squealing elephants rolled down the hill path to the plains. It was a very lively march on account of the new elephants, who gave trouble at every ford, and needed coaxing or beating every other minute. Big Ch09 prodded Kala Nag spitefully, for he was very angry, but little Ch09 was too happy to speak. Peterson Sahib had noticed him, and given him money, so he felt as a private soldier would feel if he had been called out of the ranks and praised by his commander-in-chief. What did Peterson Sahib mean by the elephant dance? He said, at last, softly to his mother. Big Ch09 heard him and grunted. That thou shouldst never be one of these hill buffaloes of trackers. That was what he meant. Oh, you in front, what is blocking the way? An Assamese driver, 2 or 3 elephants ahead, turned round angrily, crying, "Bring up Kala Nag, and knock this youngster of mine into good behavior. Why should Peterson Sahib have chosen me to go down with you donkeys of the rice fields? Lay your beast alongside, Ch09, and let him prod with his tusks. By all the gods of the hills, these new elephants are possessed, or else they can smell their companions in the jungle." Kala Nag hit the new elephant in the ribs and knocked the wind out of him, as Big Ch09 said, "We have swept the hills of wild elephants at the last catch. It is only your carelessness in driving. Must I keep order along the whole line?" "Hear him," said the other driver. "We have swept the hills." "Ho! Ho! You are very wise, you plains people. Anyone but a mudhead who never saw the jungle would know that the drives are ended for the season. Therefore all the wild elephants tonight will, but why should I waste wisdom on a river turtle? What will they do?" Little Ch09 called out. "Oh hey, little one. Art thou there? Well, I will tell thee, for thou hast a cool head. They will dance, and it behooves thy father, who has swept all the hills of all the elephants, to double-chain his pickets tonight." "What talk is this?" said Big Ch09. "For 40 years, father and son, we have tended elephants, and we have never heard such moonshine about dances." "Yes, but a plainsman who lives in a hut knows only the 4 walls of his hut." "Well, leave thy elephants unshackled tonight and see what comes. As for their dancing, I have seen the place where Baprebap. How many windings has the Dihang River? Here is another ford, and we must swim the calves. Stop still, you behind there." And in this way, talking and wrangling and splashing through the rivers, they made their first march to a sort of receiving camp for the new elephants. But they lost their tempers long before they got there. Then the elephants were chained by their hind legs to their big stumps of pickets, and extra ropes were fitted to the new elephants, and the fodder was piled before them, and the hill drivers went back to Peterson Sahib through the afternoon light, telling the plains drivers to be extra careful that night, and laughing when the plains drivers asked the reason. Little Ch09 attended to Kala Nag's supper, and as evening fell, wandered through the camp, unspeakably happy, in search of a tom-tom. When an Indian child's heart is full, he does not run about and make a noise in an irregular fashion. He sits down to a sort of revel all by himself. And little Ch09 had been spoken to by Peterson Sahib. If he had not found what he wanted, I believe he would have been ill. But the sweetmeat seller in the camp lent him a little tom-tom, a drum beaten with the flat of the hand, and he sat down, cross-legged, before Kala Nag as the stars began to come out, the tom-tom in his lap, and he thumped and he thumped and he thumped, and the more he thought of the great honor that had been done to him, the more he thumped, all alone among the elephant fodder. There was no tune and no words, but the thumping made him happy. The new elephants strained at their ropes, and squealed and trumpeted from time to time, and he could hear his mother in the camp hut putting his small brother to sleep with an old song about the great god Shiv, who once told all the animals what they should eat. It is a very soothing lullaby, and the first verse says, Shiv, who poured the harvest and made the winds to blow, sitting at the doorways of a day of long ago, gave to each his portion, food and toil and fate, from the king upon the gadi to the beggar at the gate. All things made he Shiva the preserver. Mahadev. Mahadev. He made all, thorn for the camel, fodder for the kine, and mother's heart for sleepy head, O little son of mine. Little Ch09 came in with a joyous tunkatunk at the end of each verse, till he felt sleepy and stretched himself on the fodder at Ch09's side. At last the elephants began to lie down one after another as is their custom, till only Ch09 at the right of the line was left standing up, and he rocked slowly from side to side, his ears put forward to listen to the night wind as it blew very slowly across the hills. The air was full of all the night noises that, taken together, make one big silence, the click of one bamboo stem against the other, the rustle of something alive in the undergrowth, the scratch and squawk of a half-waked bird. Birds are awake in the night much more often than we imagine, and the fall of water ever so far away. Little Ch09 slept for some time, and when he waked it was brilliant moonlight, and Ch09 was still standing up with his ears cocked. Little Ch09 turned, rustling in the fodder, and watched the curve of his big back against half the stars in heaven, and while he watched he heard, so far away that it sounded no more than a pinhole of noise pricked through the stillness, the hoot-toot of a wild elephant. All the elephants in the lines jumped up as if they had been shot, and their grunts at last waked the sleeping mahouts, and they came out and drove in the picket pegs with big mallets, and tightened this rope and knotted that till all was quiet. One new elephant had nearly grubbed up his picket, and big Ch09 took off Ch09's leg chain and shackled that elephant forefoot to hindfoot, but slipped a loop of grass string round Ch09's leg, and told him to remember that he was tied fast. He knew that he and his father and his grandfather had done the very same thing hundreds of times before. Ch09 did not answer to the order by gurgling, as he usually did. He stood still, looking out across the moonlight, his head a little raised and his ears spread like fans, up to the great folds of the Garo hills. "Tend to him if he grows restless in the night," said big Ch09 to little Ch09, and he went into the hut and slept. Little Ch09 was just going to sleep, too, when he heard the coir string snap with a little tang, and Ch09 rolled out of his pickets as slowly and as silently as a cloud rolls out of the mouth of a valley. Little Ch09 pattered after him, barefooted, down the road in the moonlight, calling under his breath, Ch09. Ch09. Take me with you, O Ch09. The elephant turned, without a sound, took 3 strides back to the boy in the moonlight, put down his trunk, swung him up to his neck, and almost before little Ch09 had settled his knees, slipped into the forest. There was one blast of furious trumpeting from the lines, and then the silence shut down on everything, and Ch09 began to move. Sometimes a tuft of high grass washed along his sides as a wave washes along the sides of a ship, and sometimes a cluster of wild pepper vines would scrape along his back, or a bamboo would creak where his shoulder touched it. But between those times he moved absolutely without any sound, drifting through the thick Garo forest as though it had been smoke. He was going uphill, but though little Ch09 watched the stars in the rifts of the trees, he could not tell in what direction. Then Ch09 reached the crest of the ascent and stopped for a minute, and little Ch09 could see the tops of the trees lying all speckled and furry under the moonlight for miles and miles, and the blue-white mist over the river in the hollow. Ch09 leaned forward and looked, and he felt that the forest was awake below him, awake and alive and crowded. A big brown fruit-eating bat brushed past his ear, a porcupine's quills rattled in the thicket, and in the darkness between the tree stems he heard a hog-bear digging hard in the moist warm earth, and snuffing as it digged. Then the branches closed over his head again, and Ch09 began to go down into the valley, not quietly this time, but as a runaway gun goes down a steep bank in one rush. The huge limbs moved as steadily as pistons, 8 feet to each stride, and the wrinkled skin of the elbow points rustled. The undergrowth on either side of him ripped with a noise like torn canvas, and the saplings that he heaved away right and left with his shoulders sprang back again and banged him on the flank, and great trails of creepers, all matted together, hung from his tusks as he threw his head from side to side and plowed out his pathway. Then little Ch09 laid himself down close to the great neck lest a swinging bough should sweep him to the ground, and he wished that he were back in the lines again. The grass began to get squashy, and Ch09's feet sucked and squelched as he put them down, and the night mist at the bottom of the valley chilled little Ch09. There was a splash and a trample, and the rush of running water, and Ch09 strode through the bed of a river, feeling his way at each step. Above the noise of the water, as it swirled round the elephant's legs, little Ch09 could hear more splashing and some trumpeting both upstream and down, great grunts and angry snortings, and all the mist about him seemed to be full of rolling, wavy shadows. "Ai," he said, half aloud, his teeth chattering. "The elephant folk are out tonight. It is the dance, then." Ch09 swashed out of the water, blew his trunk clear, and began another climb. But this time he was not alone, and he had not to make his path. That was made already, 6 feet wide, in front of him, where the bent jungle grass was trying to recover itself and stand up. Many elephants must have gone that way only a few minutes before. Little Ch09 looked back, and behind him a great wild tusker with his little pig's eyes glowing like hot coals was just lifting himself out of the misty river. Then the trees closed up again, and they went on and up, with trumpetings and crashings, and the sound of breaking branches on every side of them. At last Ch09 stood still between 2 tree trunks at the very top of the hill. They were part of a circle of trees that grew round an irregular space of some 3 or 4 acres, and in all that space, as little Ch09 could see, the ground had been trampled down as hard as a brick floor. Some trees grew in the center of the clearing, but their bark was rubbed away, and the white wood beneath showed all shiny and polished in the patches of moonlight. There were creepers hanging from the upper branches, and the bells of the flowers of the creepers, great waxy white things like convolvuluses, hung down fast asleep. But within the limits of the clearing there was not a single blade of green, nothing but the trampled earth. The moonlight showed it all iron gray, except where some elephants stood upon it, and their shadows were inky black. Little Ch09 looked, holding his breath, with his eyes starting out of his head, and as he looked, more and more elephants swung out into the open from between the tree trunks. Little Ch09 could only count up to 10, and he counted again and again on his fingers till he lost count of the tens, and his head began to swim. Outside the clearing he could hear them crashing in the undergrowth as they worked their way up the hillside, but as soon as they were within the circle of the tree trunks they moved like ghosts. There were white-tusked wild males, with fallen leaves and nuts and twigs lying in the wrinkles of their necks and the folds of their ears, fat, slow-footed she-elephants, with restless, little pinky black calves only 3 or 4 feet high running under their stomachs, young elephants with their tusks just beginning to show, and very proud of them, lanky, scraggy old maid elephants, with their hollow anxious faces, and trunks like rough bark, savage old bull elephants, scarred from shoulder to flank with great wheals and cuts of bygone fights, and the caked dirt of their solitary mud baths dropping from their shoulders, and there was one with a broken tusk and the marks of the full stroke, the terrible drawing scrape, of a tiger's claws on his side. They were standing head to head, or walking to and fro across the ground in couples, or rocking and swaying all by themselves, scores and scores of elephants. Ch09 knew that so long as he lay still on Ch09's neck nothing would happen to him, for even in the rush and scramble of a Keda drive a wild elephant does not reach up with his trunk and drag a man off the neck of a tame elephant. And these elephants were not thinking of men that night. Once they started and put their ears forward when they heard the chinking of a leg iron in the forest, but it was Padmini, Peterson Sahib's pet elephant, her chain snapped short off, grunting, snuffling up the hillside. She must have broken her pickets and come straight from Peterson Sahib's camp, and little Ch09 saw another elephant, one that he did not know, with deep rope galls on his back and breast. He, too, must have run away from some camp in the hills about. At last there was no sound of any more elephants moving in the forest, and Kala Nag rolled out from his station between the trees and went into the middle of the crowd, clucking and gurgling, and all the elephants began to talk in their own tongue, and to move about. Still lying down, little Ch09 looked down upon scores and scores of broad backs, and wagging ears, and tossing trunks, and little rolling eyes. He heard the click of tusks as they crossed other tusks by accident, and the dry rustle of trunks twined together, and the chafing of enormous sides and shoulders in the crowd, and the incessant flick and hiss of the great tails. Then a cloud came over the moon, and he sat in black darkness. But the quiet, steady hustling and pushing and gurgling went on just the same. He knew that there were elephants all round Kala Nag, and that there was no chance of backing him out of the assembly, so he set his teeth and shivered. In Akeda at least there was torchlight and shouting, but here he was all alone in the dark, and once a trunk came up and touched him on the knee. Then an elephant trumpeted, and they all took it up for 5 or 10 terrible seconds. The dew from the trees above spattered down like rain on the unseen backs, and a dull booming noise began, not very loud at first, and little Ch09 could not tell what it was. But it grew and grew, and Kala Nag lifted up one forefoot and then the other, and brought them down on the ground 1-2, 1-2, as steadily as trip hammers. The elephants were stamping all together now, and it sounded like a war drum beaten at the mouth of a cave. The dew fell from the trees till there was no more left to fall, and the booming went on, and the ground rocked and shivered, and little Ch09 put his hands up to his ears to shut out the sound. But it was all one gigantic jar that ran through him, this stamp of hundreds of heavy feet on the raw earth. Once or twice he could feel Kala Nag and all the others surge forward a few strides, and the thumping would change to the crushing sound of juicy green things being bruised, but in a minute or two the boom of feet on hard earth began again. A tree was creaking and groaning somewhere near him. He put out his arm and felt the bark, but Kala Nag moved forward, still tramping, and he could not tell where he was in the clearing. There was no sound from the elephants, except once, when 2 or 3 little calves squeaked together. Then he heard a thump and a shuffle, and the booming went on. It must have lasted fully 2 hours, and little Ch09 ached in every nerve, but he knew by the smell of the night air that the dawn was coming. The morning broke in one sheet of pale yellow behind the green hills, and the booming stopped with the first ray, as though the light had been an order. Before little Ch09 had got the ringing out of his head, before even he had shifted his position, there was not an elephant in sight except Kala Nag, Padmini, and the elephant with the rope gulls, and there was neither sign nor rustle nor whisper down the hillsides to show where the others had gone. Little Ch09 stared again and again. The clearing, as he remembered it, had grown in the night. More trees stood in the middle of it, but the undergrowth and the jungle grass at the sides had been rolled back. Little Ch09 stared once more. Now he understood the trampling. The elephants had stamped out more room, had stamped the thick grass and juicy cane to trash, the trash into slivers, the slivers into tiny fibers, and the fibers into hard earth. "Wah," said little Ch09, and his eyes were very heavy. "Kala Nag, my lord, let us keep by Padmini and go to Peterson Sahib's camp, or I shall drop from thy neck." The third elephant watched the 2 go away, snorted, wheeled round, and took his own path. He may have belonged to some little native king's establishment, 50 or 60 or 100 miles away. 2 hours later, as Peterson Sahib was eating early breakfast, his elephants, who had been double-chained that night, began to trumpet, and Padmini, mired to the shoulders, with Kala Nag, very footsore, shambled into the camp. Little Ch09's face was grey and pinched, and his hair was full of leaves and drenched with dew, but he tried to salute Peterson Sahib, and cried faintly, "The dance, the elephant dance. I have seen it, and I die." As Kala Nag sat down, he slid off his neck in a dead faint. But, since native children have no nerves worth speaking of, in 2 hours he was lying very contentedly in Peterson Sahib's hammock with Peterson Sahib's shooting coat under his head, and a glass of warm milk, a little brandy, with a dash of quinine, inside of him, and while the old hairy, scarred hunters of the jungle sat 3 deep before him, looking at him as though he were a spirit, he told his tale in short words, as a child will, and wound up with, "Now, if I lie in one word, send men to see, and they will find that the elephant folk have trampled down more room in their dance room, and they will find 10 and 10, and many times 10, tracks leading to that dance room. They made more room with their feet. I have seen it. Kala Nag took me, and I saw. Also Kala Nag is very leg-weary." Little Tumai lay back and slept all through the long afternoon and into the twilight, and while he slept Peterson Sahib and Makwa Appa followed the track of the 2 elephants for 15 miles across the hills. Peterson Sahib had spent 18 years in catching elephants, and he had only once before found such a dance place. Makwa Appa had no need to look twice at the clearing to see what had been done there, or to scratch with his toe in the packed, rammed earth. "The child speaks truth," said he. "All this was done last night, and I have counted 70 tracks crossing the river. See, Sahib, where Padmini's leg iron cut the bark of that tree." Yes, she was there too. They looked at one another and up and down, and they wondered. For the ways of elephants are beyond the wit of any man, black or white, to fathom. 40 years and 5, said Makwa Appa, have I followed my lord, the elephant, but never have I heard that any child of man had seen what this child has seen. By all the gods of the hills, it is what can we say, and he shook his head. When they got back to camp it was time for the evening meal. Peterson Sahib ate alone in his tent, but he gave orders that the camp should have 2 sheep and some fowls, as well as a double ration of flour and rice and salt, for he knew that there would be a feast. Big Tumai had come up hotfoot from the camp in the plains to search for his son and his elephant, and now that he had found them he looked at them as though he were afraid of them both. And there was a feast by the blazing campfires in front of the lines of picketed elephants, and little Tumai was the hero of it all. And the big brown elephant catchers, the trackers and drivers and ropers, and the men who know all the secrets of breaking the wildest elephants, passed him from one to the other, and they marked his forehead with blood from the breast of a newly killed jungle cock, to show that he was a forester, initiated and free of all the jungles. And at last, when the flames died down, and the red light of the logs made the elephants look as though they had been dipped in blood too, Makwa Appa, the head of all the drivers of all the Kedas Machua Appa, Peterson Sahib's other self, who had never seen a made road in 40 years, Makwa Appa, who was so great that he had no other name than Makwa Appa, leaped to his feet, with little Tumai held high in the air above his head, and shouted, "Listen, my brothers. Listen, too, you my lords in the lines there, for I, Makwa Appa, am speaking. This little one shall no more be called little Tumai, but Tumai of the elephants, as his great-grandfather was called before him. What never man has seen he has seen through the long night, and the favor of the elephant folk and of the gods of the jungles is with him. He shall become a great tracker. He shall become greater than I, even I, Makwa Appa. He shall follow the new trail, and the stale trail, and the mixed trail, with a clear eye. He shall take no harm in the Keda when he runs under their bellies to rope the wild tuskers, and if he slips before the feet of the charging bull elephant, the bull elephant shall know who he is and shall not crush him. Hi. My lords in the chains, he whirled up the line of pickets, here is the little one that has seen your dances in your hidden places, the sight that never man saw. Give him honor, my lords. Salam Karo, my children. Make your salute to Tumai of the elephants. Gunga Pershad, aha. Hira Guj, Birchi Guj, Kattar Guj, aha. Padmini, thou hast seen him at the dance, and thou too, Kala Nag, my pearl among elephants, aha. Together. To Tumai of the elephants. Barrao. And at that last wild yell the whole line flung up their trunks till the tips touched their foreheads, and broke out into the full salute, the crashing trumpet peal that only the Viceroy of India hears, the Salamat of the Quetta. But it was all for the sake of little Ch09, who had seen what never man had seen before, the dance of the elephants at night and alone in the heart of the Garo hills. Shiv and the Grasshopper, the song that Ch09's mother sang to the baby, Shiv, who poured the harvest and made the winds to blow, sitting at the doorways of a day of long ago, gave to each his portion, food and toil and fate, from the king upon the gadi to the beggar at the gate. All things made he Shiva the preserver. Mahadev. Mahadev. He made all, thorn for the camel, fodder for the kine, and mother's heart for sleepy head, O little son of mine. Wheat he gave to rich folk, millet to the poor, broken scraps for holy men that beg from door to door, battle to the tiger, carrion to the kite, and rags and bones to wicked wolves without the wall at night. Naught he found too lofty, none he saw too low. Parvati beside him watched them come and go, thought to cheat her husband, turning Shiv to jest, stole the little grasshopper and hid it in her breast. So she tricked him, Shiva the preserver. Mahadev. Mahadev. Turn and see. Tall are the camels, heavy are the kine, but this was least of little things, O little son of mine. When the dole was ended, laughingly she said, Master, of a million mouths, is not one unfed? Laughing, Shiv made answer, all have had their part, even he, the little one, hidden 'neath thy heart. From her breast she plucked it, Parvati the thief, saw the least of little things, not a new-grown leaf. Saw and feared and wondered, making prayer to Shiv, who hath surely given meat to all that live. All things made he Shiva the preserver. Mahadev. Mahadev. He made all, thorn for the camel, fodder for the kine, and mother's heart for sleepy head, O little son of mine. Her Majesty's servants, you can work it out by fractions or by simple rule of 3, but the way of Tweedledum is not the way of Tweedledee. You can twist it, you can turn it, you can plait it till you drop, but the way of Pilly Winky's not the way of Winky Pop. It had been raining heavily for 1 whole month, raining on a camp of 30,000 men and thousands of camels, elephants, horses, bullocks, and mules, all gathered together at a place called Rawalpindi, to be reviewed by the Viceroy of India. He was receiving a visit from the Emir of Afghanistan, a wild king of a very wild country. The Emir had brought with him for a bodyguard 800 men and horses who had never seen a camp or a locomotive before in their lives, savage men and savage horses from somewhere at the back of Central Asia. Every night a mob of these horses would be sure to break their heel ropes and stampede up and down the camp through the mud in the dark, or the camels would break loose and run about and fall over the ropes of the tents, and you can imagine how pleasant that was for men trying to go to sleep. My tent lay far away from the camel lines, and I thought it was safe. But one night a man popped his head in and shouted, "Get out, quick! They're coming! My tent's gone!" I knew who they were, so I put on my boots and waterproof and scuttled out into the slush. Little Vixen, my fox terrier, went out through the other side, and then there was a roaring and a grunting and bubbling, and I saw the tent cave in, as the pole snapped, and begin to dance about like a mad ghost. A camel had blundered into it, and wet and angry as I was, I could not help laughing. Then I ran on, because I did not know how many camels might have got loose, and before long I was out of sight of the camp, plowing my way through the mud. At last I fell over the tail end of a gun, and by that knew I was somewhere near the artillery lines where the cannon were stacked at night.